Hi, welcome. Today we are going to be making a copycat version of the famous Dollywood Cinnamon Bread. But not only are we making a copycat version of that, but we are going to be making it with fresh milled flour. Joe and I just returned from a trip to Dollywood not too long ago, and all we heard before we went is how we had to try the famous cinnamon bread. So we stood in line, or I stood in line for about a half an hour to get this bread, and yeah, it was pretty good. What I typically like to do is when I find a recipe out at a restaurant or what have you, I try and come home and recreate it, but I wanted to do one better and recreate it with the fresh milled flour. So that's what we're going to be doing today. I did find a recipe online that I liked for the cinnamon bread, and this is the recipe that I am converting to fresh milled flour. I couldn't follow that recipe exactly, so I will go ahead and write what I did and put it in the description box below so you can also recreate this recipe. Now, one good thing about this recipe is sometimes when you're working with fresh milled flour, the dough, it could be just maybe a little bit drier. So the way we're going to do it is we're going to get that cinnamon going all through the bread. And so rather than having it in a loaf form, we're going to do it more in like a monkey bread style. You can pull it apart, and so you can have that ooey gooey cinnamon sugary goodness all through the bread, versus the Dollywood, the traditional bread, it's all just layered on the bottom of a loaf. I hope you stick around and join me. We're gonna have lots of fun recreating this cinnamon bread. So of course, the first thing we need to do is mill up our flour. We need 375 grams of hard white wheat. Now I typically go a little bit over. That's okay, because after I mill this flour, some of it gets stuck on the inside of the mill or in the bucket. I'm gonna go ahead and weigh it again. And if we have any leftover, I just pop that leftover wheat in the freezer, and I can use it for gravies or rolling out things, or if I'm short somewhere on my flour, I can just go to the freezer and pick that up. So let's go ahead and get the mill in place. And I have an old Grain Master Whisper Mill. This is similar to the new Wonder Mills that they have now. But one thing you want to make sure is that this tube is all the way in, and this top is popped or pushed all the way down, because otherwise it'll pop up and flour will be everywhere. Ask me how I know. And on this mill, you need to start it first and then put the grain in. I'm gonna go ahead and weigh out the flour again, so I make sure I am at 375 grams. And of course, this is all how much flour you need is all gonna depend on how humid it is outside and many other different factors. And we have had quite a bit of rain lately, so it has been humid. It's not raining today. It is a beautiful day today. Okay, 375. I have a little bit of flour left, and there's also some that is in the lid here that I will scrape off and pop that in the freezer. So I'm gonna go ahead and gather up my mixer and the rest of the ingredients. So I'm using my Bosch mixer today because I do have a KitchenAid mixer, but they really do not handle fresh milled flour very well. So I do love this Bosch mixer. It was a great investment. In fact, I pull this out more often than I do my KitchenAid mixer. We're gonna go ahead and add our flour to the bowl, and then we're gonna add in 165 grams of warm water. We're going to add in 2 teaspoons of salt. One-quarter cup of granulated sugar. And 1 egg. And we're going to go ahead and get this all mixed up. So one thing you may have noticed is that we haven't put any yeast in here yet. And we're not going to do that yet. We are going to, after all the ingredients are mixed, we are going to let the flour soak into the water and soften up that bran so we don't have such a dense loaf. And we're going to let that sit for 15 minutes to a half an hour before we come in and do the final kneading. But at this point, we are going to start adding in 1/4 cup of softened, unsalted butter, but we're going to add it a tablespoon at a time. So let me go get the butter. So I have my butter cut, and 1 stick is a 1/2 cup. We only need at this point a 1/4 cup. I'm going to save this other 1/4 cup of butter for the topping. So let's go ahead and get in 1 tablespoon at a time. So my butter stuck to the side here, so I want to make sure I scrape that off the side of the bowl and get it into the dough. And normally I am not a stickler between salted and unsalted butter. In fact, I normally don't even keep unsalted butter in my house. But when I tested this recipe for the first time, you could definitely taste the salt in the butter, and I don't want to have that much of a salt taste. So yes, definitely make sure you're using unsalted butter. So all the butter is mixed in at this point. Let me show you how it looks. So this is what the dough looks like right now. It's very shaggy and not too sticky, but just shaggy. But we still have to put the yeast in. But at this point, what we want to do is let it have a rest period. So I'm going to go ahead and cover this up with my lid, and we're going to let this dough rest for 15 minutes to a half an hour. So you may have noticed that I popped on an apron because I guess when you're working with any kind of flour, not a good idea to wear a black shirt. While this is doing its rest period, which the correct term for that is called autolyzing, I am going to go ahead and get some of these dishes cleaned up because I like to clean the kitchen as I go. It just helps me to work better when I'm not looking at a big mess. So I'll see you back here as soon as the autolyze period is over. So it's been about 30 minutes, so it's time to go ahead and get the yeast in here. And I want to mention the reason why you don't want to add the yeast in before the autolyze period is it can start the bulk fermentation process of the yeast, which in turn could make it go a little bit acidic. So and the gluten won't get a chance to develop yet because we haven't done the kneading part. So we want to leave out the yeast until this autolyze period is totally done. And you want for this recipe, you want to use active dry yeast, and I keep my yeast in the freezer. It just keeps it freshest the longest in the freezer. So we are going to add 4 teaspoons. And we're going to get all this yeast mixed in. Once the yeast is mixed in, I'm going to go ahead and let this knead on my mixer. It's 2, but you want to do a medium-high speed We're gonna let it knead for about 6 to 7 minutes. Now, as you can see in my mixer, the dough is sticking to the bowl, but I'm okay with that because in a stainless steel bowl, it does tend to stick to the sides more. I can go ahead and scrape that up. But the dough ball actually looks pretty nice. It's not sticky, and I'm able to pull it. And I know some people say pull it until you get a window pane, meaning you can see, stretch it until you can see light through. Mine's breaking a little bit, but I'm okay with this. I don't think I have ever truly gotten a true window pane in any of my bread making, and my stuff has turned out okay. The last thing I want to do is add more flour and get this more dense. So what I'm going to do is I am going to scrape up the sides of this bowl and make it into a ball, and then we are going to let this rest and rise until it's doubled in size. Usually takes about an hour, maybe 2 hours. You could put this in your oven with the light on and no temperature. One of the tricks I like to do is put it in my laundry room while I have a load of dryer items going. I don't have any laundry going today, so I'm thinking it should be okay just on the counter. I'm going to go ahead and cover it with my lid after I take out the paddles and let this rise. So I'm going to get that going, get this in a ball, and then while it's rising, we can go ahead and make the filling for our dough. When I make bread, I normally let my dough rise right here in this bowl, but I'm going to go ahead and take it out and get it into this other bowl right here, just so I can gauge better that it's doubled in size. And also I just want to make sure I get all of this really good dough scraped out of the bowl. And this really is a lovely dough. It's not sticky. It's super easy to work with. So I'm going to go ahead and get this covered with some saran wrap and put a towel over it. We'll let this rise and let's start working on our filling. So let's talk about the filling really quick. Of course, the major components of the filling is lots of butter, brown sugar, and some cinnamon and some salt. Now, you could brown the butter in the pan that you're making the bread in, and I'm actually making it in this round cast iron skillet. Like I said, I like it in a skillet because then the sweetness of this sugar and cinnamon, it kind of goes more through the rolls than in just on the bottom of a loaf. But you could definitely do this in a loaf pan if you want. But you could brown the butter in the bottom of this first. But I find that I just not a huge fan of that flavor. If you like that caramely brown butter nutty flavor, then by all means go ahead and brown your butter in your skillet until you get the little brown flakes in the skillet, and then remove the butter and put it into a heat-proof bowl. But what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put my butter in here and pop it in the microwave just until it's melted. We need 1 cup of butter. Now the recipe that I adapted called for salted butter, but I have to say that I really tasted the salt, and I'm a salt lover, so that really tells you something, that it was just a little bit too salty for me. So I'm gonna stick with the unsalted butter. I wanna let the sweetness of the sugar come through. Plus we are gonna be adding a little bit of salt to the filling mixture anyway. So I'm gonna go ahead and get this butter melted in the microwave, and then I'll meet you right back here. So my butter is melted for the most part. Now what we want to do is we want to get our cinnamon in here while the butter is still warm. That will help to bloom the flavor of the cinnamon. So we are going to put in 2 teaspoons of cinnamon and give it a good whisk. Okay, so now that the cinnamon is all mixed in there, we are going to add in a half a teaspoon of salt and a half a cup of lightly packed sugar, brown sugar. You can use dark, light, it doesn't matter. And we're going to get this all whisked in. Whisk it in until all the sugar is dissolved. And then while our dough is rising back here, this is going to start to thicken into a paste. So we're just going to go ahead and set this aside. We'll give it another good whisk when we come back to it. But for now, we're just going to set it aside and we'll come back once our dough has doubled in size. Well, I ended up putting my dough in the oven with the light on because it did seem like it was taking a little bit longer to rise. Probably did take maybe about an hour and a half to 2 hours for it to get to that point. But now at this time, we are going to go ahead and grab this is the mixture with the butter and the brown sugar and the salt. And you can see that now it's this thick paste. So what we're going to do is we are going to take about a 1/3 cup of it and we're going to add it to the bottom of our cast iron skillet. And we're just going to spread it around the bottom. Let me grab a spatula. Just give that a nice spread around the bottom of the pan. And then I'm just going to go ahead and set this aside. And we're going to go ahead and get our dough. Okay, so you want to get a clean mat or surface without any flour. Do not put any flour down on the surface because you don't want to add any more flour in here. And we're going to go ahead and get this dough turned out onto our surface. And then what we want to do is we want to stretch this out into a rectangle. And you could use a rolling pin. So you want to get it in a rectangle just about, roll it out till it's just about under a 1/2 inch thick. And it doesn't have to be perfect. That looks good. So now what we want to do is we want to grab about 2/3 of a cup of our mixture, and we're going to spread it in the center here. And you're going to have some mixture left over. So we want to go ahead and save that for a step later. So I'm just going to get all of this out of here. And we're just going to spread it around. Okay. So now what we're going to do is we're going to take the 2 short ends and fold them together so that they meet in the middle. So we're kind of encompassing this mixture. And like I said, it doesn't have to be perfect. We just want to fold it. And here you can either use a pizza cutter or a bench scraper. And we're going to cut about 1-inch strips. And then I'm even going to cut it one more time. And then we're just going to fold it in half. So you just have a little roll. And then I'm just going to go ahead and place it in our pan. And it doesn't really matter how you place it, because it's going to be more like a monkey bread or a pull-apart bread. So we're just going to repeat that. Cut this in a 1-inch strip. And I'm going to cut it again and fold it. And you're going to have some of the stuff oozing out while this happens. That's okay. We're going to scrape all this up and use it. We're not going to let any of that go to waste. You can even scoop it up as you're putting it in. So I have it all in the pan, and I think I'm just gonna put these down a little so that way it takes up more of the pan. And then I'm just gonna go ahead and scrape all this up, and I'm just gonna stick it back in this bowl for now, because we do have to let this rise a second time for about another hour, or until not doubled in size, but about 50% in size. Okay, so we have all our bread in here. So I'm going to go ahead and cover this again. Put my plastic wrap down. And then I'm also going to cover it with a towel. And we are going to let this go through its second rise. So during your last few minutes of the second rise, make sure you preheat your oven to 400 degrees. And we are going to go ahead and bring this over, scooch you down here. And it has risen 50%. It's also going to rise more in the oven. But what we're going to do is we're going to uncover this and then get the rest of our topping spread out on the top of these buns. And then I'm just going to go ahead and spread it around. Okay, so now this is ready to go into the oven. We are going to bake this for 22 to 26 minutes. We want to make sure that the top is nice and brown on top, and we can also take its temperature. It should be around 200 degrees to know that it's done in the middle. So let's go ahead and get this in the oven. So while we have the cinnamon bread cooking in the oven, we can go ahead and whip up our glaze really quick. And it's really simple. All we need is 3/4 cup of lightly packed powdered sugar. And I do have more of this if we need it. Maybe we won't. 1/2. Probably a little bit more than 3/4 of a cup, but that's okay. And then we are going to add 1 tablespoon of milk. Milk of your choice, doesn't matter. I just happen to be using 2% milk. And then I'm just gonna mix this in. And I might need a little bit more milk since I used more brown sugar. Yeah, I'm gonna need just a splash more milk. And right now, it's pretty thick, but it is starting to loosen up here. And that is looking really good. You definitely want it to be a pourable glaze. So we'll go ahead and set this aside, and it'll be ready for us when our rolls get out of the oven. Oh my gosh, it smells insane in here. I checked these after the timer went off after 22 minutes and they weren't done yet. So let's check it now. I put them on for 4 more minutes. And we should get a temperature of 200, which we're there. We're actually a little bit over 200. And I want to let you know, make sure you put a cookie sheet on the rack below. I did not do that. The butter from the bottom bubbled up and spilled over a little in my oven, so now I kind of have a little bit of a sticky mess to clean up. So do yourself a favor and put a cookie sheet on the rack below this pan. This smells so good, but as you can see, it is piping hot. So what we're gonna do is we are gonna let this cool until the cast iron is cool to the touch. And then we're gonna come back with our glaze and we'll go ahead and sprinkle it over the top, and then we'll have a taste test. And I can't wait because this has made my entire kitchen smell so good. So I can't wait to taste these. I have been patiently waiting for this cast iron to be cool to the touch, and it is still a little bit warm, but I am just so excited to taste this and get into it. So we're gonna glaze it right now. I have the glaze that's been waiting so patiently. So I'm just gonna go ahead and drizzle this on the top. And I decided that I wanted to have a little extra punch in this glaze. So I added just a little bit of vanilla extract. So if you want to add a flavor to your glaze, you can totally do that, almond or lemon or whatever you have on hand. But let's make sure this is all the edges. You can also do a cream cheese glaze if you wanted to. That looks so good. Let's try a bite. Let's get in here and cut this. Look how nice that looks on the inside. Oh, I can't wait. Oh my gosh. Did you see that sugar just oozing? Looks so good. Let's go ahead and give this a try. Get that sugar in there. So good. Definitely make sure, like I said, normally I'm okay with switching out the butters, but you definitely need the unsalted butter for this recipe. It just lets that cinnamon and that sweetness shine through. It's so moist. The glaze is so, it just puts it over the top. Very good. So yes, you can make copycat Dollywood cinnamon bread with fresh milled flour. It's so worth it and so delicious, and you don't have to stand in line for a half an hour to get it. Just let me know in the comments if you're gonna try it, and Joe and I would love it if you subscribe to this channel. Of course, give it a like if you really enjoyed this video, and we'll see you next time. Take care, bye.